Play and Trade Guitars is giving away this Gibson Custom Shop Les Paul to one of you. How to enter? Subscribe to Play and Trade Guitars on YouTube, and we'll give it away when we hit 50,000 subscribers. Hey, welcome back to Play and Trade Guitars. I'm John, that's Zach behind the camera. This is Play and Trade Guitars, where we play it and trade it. I'm gonna be talking today about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, the Stratocaster. And I'm gonna be telling you something that's had me a little bit alarmed as I've been demoing so many Gibsons. And that is, it might just be the case that the Gibson Les Paul has ruined the Strat for me, at least lately. Now, you know, as a guitar player, you go through so many iterations of what you kind of grab for, what sounds you're trying to get, and that evolves with you kind of as a player and as a person over time. There's been points in my life where I am a hardcore Strat player. I grew up playing a Les Paul. I've gone through different phases, probably like the rest of you. But lately, I'm really feeling that the Les Paul has kind of ruined the Strat for me, and I think I have some pretty good reasons why, so keep watching. If you're in the market for a Les Paul or a Strat or any guitar, make sure you use our purchase link down in the description. It supports us directly when you buy using our link. And also, this Les Paul right here, we're giving it away when we hit 50,000 subscribers. I'm sure gonna miss it, and it's definitely part of the reason that I'm telling you right now. I'm kind of lamenting that it's kind of ruined the Strat for me. If you've watched our Gibson content, you know that we've done all sorts of demos on Gibson and Epiphone Les Pauls. We've got factory tours to check out. But let's dive into my reasons for why the Les Paul has just ruined the Strat for me as of late. Number one, I think, is just an overall design thing. When I have this guitar on, I've really noticed everything from the three-way switch being right here, being so easy to change pickup settings with basically on the fly while I'm strumming. I can change this and catch the pickups. That's actually something that is functional to me that I've really noticed. I've also related to that, realized that me personally as a player, I just don't need a five-way pickup selector switch, because for right or wrong, I don't use it. And the thing is, I love the simplicity of a Gibson style toggle switch. I think it gives you all the three sounds you need right at your fingertips. And if you really need to mess with something down here, like a Strat, it only needs to be every now and then when I'm changing my volume knob or my tone. For a quick change in tone, I like the three-way switch. I think that that's a big benefit, and a reason that when I started demoing a lot more Strats, I'm kind of fumbling around, trying to stay out of the way of the whammy bar and change the five-way switch and change it to the right setting, which can also be a little tricky, I've found, after playing so many Les Pauls. Still love a Strat because, let's face it, a Strat is a Strat and nothing else sounds like a Strat, but just kind of what I've been noticing in my own personal playing lately. So let us know in the comments what you have been gravitating towards. Next thing, design-wise, when it comes to the Les Paul. But simple things also like access to the controls. If you need to work on this guitar, I don't need to take the pickguard off, the entire assembly off like a Strat and get all the strings out of the way. I can get at my pots or my electronics for any repairs or modifications, or my three-way toggle switch via the covers on the back. Nice, beautiful, clean, and simple. I like that. I also would say that the scale length is something I've really noticed that I'm gravitating towards that 24 3/4 of the Gibson. So it's actually a little shorter, 3/4 of an inch shorter than a Fender guitar. And I am somebody who really likes to play with 10-gauge strings. So I also like the shorter scale of a Gibson combined with just the right amount of tension, the way that 10-gauge feel on the shorter scale length neck. So I've really noticed that as something I like too. Another big one I've really gravitated towards is the flatter radius of a Gibson. So the radius of the fretboard is 12 inches on a Gibson, which means it's flatter than a Fender. Now a vintage Fender is gonna be even more humped with a 7 1/4 radius, and that has its feel all its own. But on a modern Fender, you're typically seeing something like you see on this beautiful candy apple red Strat, which is gonna be like a 9 1/2 inch radius. That feels great too, but to me, especially, I also play classical guitar, and to me, I'm starting to think the flatter the better. I like the speed, I like the ability to get around on a flatter neck, like a Gibson style radius. So radius is another one that I've really noticed. Here's another thing that has started to bug me, and it never used to bug me until I played so many Les Pauls as of late. These contours, I know they're sleek and sexy, they drive me nuts. There's something about the way this body contour slides that I'm not gelling with lately. And it's obviously not a deal breaker because the Strat sounds great and most of this isn't fun, but I'm giving you real reasons why I'm struggling to appreciate the Strat as of late compared to the Les Paul. And I actually don't like the way when the guitar is slung around you, the Strat has a tendency to slide. I'd rather it just be a slab like a Telecaster or a Les Paul that just sits against my body and I can feel that resonance. I don't want my arm allowing the guitar itself to move against my body because of the contour. Now this modern Strat is finished in poly, like most all modern Strats. And there is probably something to be said. I mean, you can drop a comment if you think there's a difference. First of all, mahogany just smells really good, so you can never get away from that. But there's something about a nitro finish I've also just really come to appreciate. I like that little bit of wear that comes a lot easier on nitro. I like that kind of stick to it. I also, though, have learned I'm a sucker for satin nitro. I think satin nitro is probably one of my favorite feels, this being gloss. But we played the Faded series, and actually the first guitar I had that was a Les Paul was a satin finish. So it's also interesting to realize that what you grow up with also still greatly influences what you think of a guitar this many years later. Just something else I've noticed. Something else I kind of hinted at on the Strat is this trem bar. When I was an avid Strat player, I almost always locked my trem completely down and never had the bar on the guitar. But one of the best attributes of a Strat, if you're gonna do the Strat thing, is the fact that you have a floating tremolo. And I think you should let it float and you should use it. But that kind of then makes me really, really feel and realize how much it kind of gets in the way of my hand, especially like I said, if I'm trying to control both the trem arm, the 5-way selector, which is easy to bump into the wrong position. The one benefit I will give obviously to the Strat, which I'm sure you'll all agree, is that you got that volume knob right here. That is one thing they definitely got right. The trem is also going to bring up tuning stability. And there's people that complain about the Strat not staying in tune, and there's plenty of people who complain about a Les Paul not staying in tune. I think that personally is completely overblown. Might be controversial, but I think most of the people who complain about the G string or one of the strings being out of tune all the time, it's almost always something in the fretting hand that is either pushing too hard or pulling the string. Because I just don't encounter the same problem that so many people find. I like just a fixed bridge. So going back to what I said about locking the Strat bridge down, the trem down, I like the simplicity of just a fixed bridge and knowing that once I tune it up, in theory, it's gonna stay a lot closer because I don't have anything to move around like a trem. That said, I will give it to 6 on a side. I will definitely give it to 6 on a side tuning. I love to have all the tuning pegs on one side. Fender has that right, and man, would it be ugly to see a Fender style headstock on a Les Paul. So if you want to Photoshop that for us and send it to us, you can, but I don't even want to think about how bad that would look. All right. Now let's get down to sounds. That's kind of design and feel, and those things do greatly affect the playing experience and the sound that you can pull out of the guitar. I've really come to notice that as I've played all these guitars. Now let's talk sounds, and my number 2 biggest category here is going to be talking about pickups. Of course, on a Les Paul nowadays, we think about what comes to mind is almost always humbuckers, right? And it's almost easy to remember, or it's easy to forget that the Les Paul started the first 6 years of its journey with single coil P90s. P90s could be the Strat killer, because if you're going to argue that to get the single coil sound you need a Strat, I would say P90 is kind of game over, particularly in neck position. And that's hard for me to say because I love neck position on a Strat, that position 5, almost more than anything on the planet. But a close second, or certainly a competitor, is going to be when you hear the sound of a P90 in neck position on a Les Paul. On this Les Paul, of course, we have a pair of custom buckers, so we have humbuckers. And there's just a question of how humbuckers sit in a mix. I think when you're playing with a band, if you want a reinforced sound, a strong sound, it is hard to beat a humbucker. And then beyond that, there's kind of a complaint that humbuckers can get a little muddy in a mix. And there's a complaint that with single coils, you can get a little bit too bright or thin in the mix. And one thing I'll definitely agree, and I'm sure all of you will agree, is to have one of each is the ultimate weapon when you're layering or recording. Because when you're recording in the studio, or even if you're playing in a band with 2 guitar players, you know, I could pick apart which one I like right now. But if I'm playing in a band, it almost always is the best idea to have one of each. Somebody playing something single coil, somebody playing something humbucker, and the spread of that is always, I think, sonically, almost always going to sound better, and that's probably the way to go. But let us know in the comments, what is your ultimate pickup? A Strat doing its thing is one of the greatest sounds. Stevie Ray Vaughan is one of my favorite guitar players of all time. I think you get a little bit more versatility out of Les Paul in general than you get out of Strat. I wouldn't say the same about a Telecaster. I think a Telecaster is going to give the Les Paul a run for its money for best guitar of all time. But if I'm purely talking Les Paul versus Strat, that's just something that I've noticed. And that's the pickup sound. So let us know what your favorite pickups are, and check out our demo. We did a comparison of the P90s and humbuckers on a Les Paul. And then you can watch all of our Strat videos to check out the latest iterations of single coil pickups and a couple of our vintage ones too. Now, number 3 is gonna be what I'm gonna just call what I grew up with. And it's interesting to think back as I play all these brand new guitars, that so much of what I pulled out of the lineup when I was playing all the Les Pauls, I only really realized the true extent after the fact, to which it was basically the same specs that I grew up playing my very first Les Paul that I got back in 2002. And that was actually a satin finish, 50s style neck Les Paul. It was my Les Paul Voodoo I got from Strings and Things in Memphis, Tennessee. My dad took me down there. Shout out to you, Dad. Thank you. And I'll say it was so amazing to be, that was a lifetime ago. And yet all the specs, as I lined up all these new production Les Pauls, what I gravitated towards ended up being nearly exactly the same specs as the guitar that I put so many hours into when I was so much younger. And so that stuff really sticks with you. It's amazing to see how much that sticks with you. I'm also gonna say, for everything I'm pitting the Les Paul against the Strat, it also goes to show you that it's so personal. When you're shopping for a guitar, it comes so much down to personal preference. Even as I give you kind of a silly list like this, it's almost like something you have to hear it for yourself, and you have to have it resonate with you. Because if it's something that you're just taking kind of as gospel from somebody else, that one is the better, or something is better than the other, it may not bear out in your playing. And of course, like I said, you go through iterations where one is your favorite, kind of falls in and out of fashion with your own sound and what you're trying to get. And that's one of the coolest things about guitar, is that you can go in these phases, I think, and it keeps it fresh. Maybe I'm gonna play my Les Paul now for the next 6-12 months until basically I get the itch to go back to single coil. Those kind of cycles are one of my favorite parts about playing guitar. I will give you a few parting ideas on where the Strat does excel though. And don't get me wrong, the Strat is great. Lately I've been digging the Les Paul, but number 1 is, like I said already, only a Strat sounds like a Strat to me. A Strat sounds so Stratty. You've probably heard people say that, but it's absolutely true, and that sound is absolutely beautiful. So if that's what you're going for, there is no substitute. If that's a sound you want, there is absolutely no substitute to a Strat. And man, this is a close race, but one of my favorite guitar sounds of all time is a Strat in neck position. Possibly my favorite sound of all time. So it's pretty hard for me to knock the Strat too much when one of my all-time favorite sounds comes from the single coil neck pickup in a Strat. And you can get darn close, or something I think just as sweet and amazing with a P90 in neck. It's a little bit of a different flavor, but something about a single coil pickup in neck is hard to beat. And on a Strat, that's what you're gonna get. I think it sounds amazing. Here's another big one, the design thing that the Strat really definitely wins, of course, and it's designed to, is that access to the upper register. So it's always gonna be it always feels a little bit less like a boat when you play a Strat compared to a Les Paul. And that's just something easy access when you have this deep cutaway here to get all the way up that neck. Talking about the scale length of a Strat, it's longer, so it's 25.5, right? Now what that's actually gonna allow you to do is use slinkier strings at tension. So in theory, this is just my preference, but I would never put anything less than 10 gauge on a Gibson, which is shorter scale length, because the shorter scale length you go, the heavier gauge strings you need. So actually, I mean, on a small, like a half-size guitar or 3/4 size guitar, short scale guitar, you need thicker strings to keep the guitar at the appropriate tension when you're tuned up. On a guitar that's longer, it's gonna mean the opposite. You can get away with having skinnier 9-gauge strings as kind of a standard. So I could see saying, just as a kind of a general rule of thumb, that Strats deserve 9s and Les Pauls deserve 10s. That's just my kind of general rule of thumb, although I still like the sound of 10s on a Strat too. Another design thing where the Strat kind of takes, I already said the 6 on a side headstock, that's game over to me. That's the easiest way to tune a guitar. But it's so modular. One nice thing is that it is a bolt-on neck, right? And that idea coming out of the 50s of just having something that was assembly line ready and interchangeable parts. One of my first Strats that I ever got, it's got an ash body, butterscotch. I love this guitar. One problem with it though is that the neck is permanently backbowed. Now I have some sentimental attachment to this guitar in particular, so I just deal with it. And in fact, the way I deal with it is I string it with 11-gauge strings. I give it even more tension to pull the neck back from backbow. But the beauty of that is, because it's a bolt-on neck, what I really need to do is just unbolt this neck and put a new one on. That modular design, that interchangeable design of a Fender is hard to beat. And my final way that a Fender beats Gibson every single time is gonna come down to the indestructibility of a Fender. I could throw this thing on the floor, I could throw it down the stairs, it would be fine. I'm sweating standing here next to my Les Paul right now, I have it in a small kind of low profile stand, and I'm already sweating because I have knocked Les Pauls out of stands before and broken headstocks. And one design feature and one way that Fender will always win is Fender is just more roadworthy because it's tougher. This headstock is not going to snap on you. It's really, really hard to damage a Fender, a Tele, a Strat. And I think the biggest reason I could say, I call Fender kind of the most trusty workhorse guitar there is. And single coil Fender sound is just kind of in my blood too. I absolutely love that sound. But as I've gone through these series of reviewing brand new guitars, I've just really, really taken a liking lately to the Gibson Les Paul. Maybe I should really just call it kind of rediscovering my love for Les Pauls that started when I was very young, and I put a lot of hours into my first Les Paul. And so to see that those same specs have come out as kind of my favorite, I actually thought was really, really educational and really eye-opening and enlightening for me as a player. So I'd love to see that happen. I still love the Telecaster, probably the best guitar of all time. That's for another video. But drop in the comments, let us know what you think. What are you gravitating towards? Do you keep one of each in your collection? I guess the best thing to do, right, is have one of everything. So you probably have to have a Les Paul, a Strat, a Telecaster, a 335, something with P90s. So start building that collection, and when you buy those guitars, shop on Zounds, use our purchase link down in the description, and we'll see you for our next guitar demo, and check out our suite of guitar demos from Gibson, Epiphone, Fender, Squier, and lots more to come. Drop in the comments, let us know what you want to see, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.